All right. Now when our API side is ready, now we'll start consuming this API in our mobile MAUI app. All right. So for this, we are going to use Refit client. The first thing in our mobile MAUI application, we are going to add one package, NuGet package. That is going to be refit.http client factory. Now, how to set up this, what it is, what it gives us, for all these things, I already have a video on my channel. I'm going to add the link of that video in my description box. So I would recommend you guys to pause this video here, go back to that video, watch that complete video, and then come back to this one. And if you already know all of these things and you have already watched that video, then it's good. We can continue here. All right. So we installed this package. We verify. Yes, we have refit.http client factory. Now we'll set up this, configure this in our mobile application, MAUI side. So here I'm going to create a new method. I'll say private it static void configure refit. Oh, adding directly inside namespace. Now we are good. And inside this, I'm going to pass the service collection as a parameter. I service collection services. All right. Then we are going to call it before builder.build. Configure refit. Here we'll say builder.services. Now we need to do everything inside this method. Now here we will tell this Refit client who is actually going to make HTTP calls to our API, that what is the base URL, what all things you need to do. If this is some uh, protected resource, that means we need to add some uh, login or currently logged in users information, maybe JWT token or all. So for these things, how to add these, from where you will get all these things and all this stuff, we are going to tell this. Okay. So for this, first we need a base API URL. Base API URL. We are going to get it. Right now, we have this in our API. If we check our app settings, here we have this domain. This is where our API lives. Now, while this will work, but it will work only on the emulators, because when we say HTTP localhost is on this system. When I say this system, that means this Windows PC where I'm developing it. So from Android emulator, we can connect this using a simple different loopback address, but that Android emulator lives inside this Windows PC only, so there can be a connection. But if I want to test this application on my physical device, now physical device is a separate device that cannot connect to this localhost directly, because now these are two different devices. So for these, we need to host our API somewhere. Okay, if we have some server, we can host it there, or there are some tools which actually converts or gives some public URL for these localhost and some ports, but we are not going to use those, because in Visual Studio we have a concept of dev tunnels. So it does the same thing. It is going to generate a public URL for us, which will point to this localhost. And the good thing about this is we can debug our code. So we can put breakpoints in our code, and then this mobile application from our physical device, it will make the call to that public URL, and then that public URL is going to use our Visual Studio, our project, our code directly. So we can debug that as well. So I'm going to tell you how the dev tunnels, how to set that dev tunnel, that I'm going to tell you now. Even for this thing, this localhost, if we are testing it on emulator, then the normal API calls would work. But we have images, photos in our application. So the way we are storing the photos, those are this domain slash and the photo path or URL, whatever it is. Now, when we are directly going to use these in our these image controls, then these image controls are not making explicit HTTP calls to this API, right? That means these are not going through this Refit client. These are direct access of these. So in this case, these will not be able to do this, because on Android we need to change this localhost to 10.0.2.2. This is going to be equivalent of this. So we need to make these things. So for all these issues, using dev tunnel is a best option for us. Okay. So we are going to use dev tunnel. Let me quickly show you how to set up the dev tunnel. For this, what we need to do? First thing, let's select our API project as startup project. We have it here, API. Then these launch profiles. Here we can go and we can say dev tunnels. And here we can say create a tunnel. Click on it. Now it is going to ask us some information. Name of this tunnel, we can name it whatever we want. Okay, so we'll say MAUI social media YT. Tunnel type, let's make it persistent so that if I'm coming back tomorrow for recording or using it, it should be there. By default, if it is temporary, if we close the Visual Studio, then it will create a new tunnel. So we need to change the URL in that case. But if we make it persistent, that means the URL will be same. If I'm restarting the Visual Studio or system, or I'm coming tomorrow for this, it will be access, because we are just testing. So we can have this public and just okay. And it will take some time. It is very quick actually, but let's see. And it will prompt us, it will give us an alert that dev tunnel has created. And we have this, your dev tunnel has been successfully created and it's selected as the currently active tunnel. Now if we go to this same thing, here we should see dev tunnels and this one is selected. These are all other dev tunnels. Now one thing to note here, if we close Visual Studio and open it again, the dev tunnel would be there, but that will not be selected by default. Whenever you are opening the Visual Studio, first thing you should come to the API and select this dev tunnel. By default, when you will close the Visual Studio, open it, it will be in this state. That means none dev tunnel, no active tunnel selected. So you need to come here and select your dev tunnel, and then you would be good. Now let me show you. Now if I start this application, now it is going to start on localhost and on dev tunnel. So first, when you set up the dev tunnel, you should run it for the first time. Then you should allow it. So it is going to ask us starting dev tunnel. Not responding. Let's wait for it, and it did something for. Okay. Did it open something? No. Okay, let's do this. If it is not directly opening anything, then API properties launch settings.json. Here we have launch browser. We'll say launch browser pro and launch URL. Should be anything. ABC. It could be anything. It will just open this URL. Right now we don't have any URL here, so but we are good. Did we set up the Swagger? No, right? But let's have. Now if I run this API again, it should open the browser with this URL. For localhost, it will be http localhost 7091 slash swagger. For dev tunnel, it should be dev tunnel URL, and then this is what it, this URL and this. Because we are first time opening it, it is asking us to continue. Yes, we know this is safe, and now we are good. Okay. Now here we can see something. Duplicate endpoint name get user posts. We need to fix this as well. But right now we know this is the URL. We just need to copy this till devtunnel.ms, not after that. So till devtunnel.ms, we'll need this only, and we'll fix this error as here. We are back to MAUI program. Here we'll set this base API URL with this. Save it. Now let's quickly go to our API and we'll fix this. Services, services endpoints, post endpoints, delete post toggle, get posts, the post, get user posts. Okay. So here it should be get bookmark post. Save everything. Now let's quickly run it one more time. This time it should directly open the dev tunnel. And it opened this thing. Okay, 404 that we know because we have not set up Swagger, so we are okay. But it opened this. All right, close it. Let's go back to our MAUI program. Close all tabs. MAUI program.cs, and we have this dev tunnel URL. So this is going to be our base API URL. Now one more thing, because we are going to use this dev tunnel, we need to change the domain in our API, so that whatever image we are saving, all those should have this as a URL prefix, and this the images can be directly accessed using this URL. In API, we'll go to app settings.development.json, and here we are going to add this. Let me comment the previous one out. Add this, and same thing for issuer also we'll do. Now it could be any string. Issuer does not need to be your URL only, because the creation and the validation at both of those places it should be same. So let's leave it like this. We need this to generate our photo URLs, image URLs. All right, save everything, and now we are good from API side. Here we have base URL. On the basis of this, we are going to set our Refit API clients. Now, how Refit works, as I already mentioned, I'm going to drop the link of that video in description box so you will understand all norms of this. So in this, we simply define interfaces for our APIs, and it automatically generates the code for this, which we don't need to look at. We will directly inject those interfaces and we can directly use those interfaces. Now, making the HTTP call, getting the response, parsing it, all these things will be handled by Refit only. Okay, so we just need to define the contract. So in this MAUI project only, I am going to create a API folder, APIs, and inside this I'm going to create interfaces. First we need iAuth API, public interface iAuth API. Then I'll say public interface iPosts API. Then I'm going to say public interface I user API. Right? We have these three set of endpoints. Now inside this we just need to define the API request and response related things in a way the way we are going to call it. So this should be a simple method. For example, for login, we know we have a method which returns task of uh, login response DTO. The name could be anything. I'm going to get this login async only. And here that our login API, it expects login DTU as a parameter. We have defined this. Now, right now, this is a simple interface. It is not related to Refit. Now, we need to tell that this is going to be used by Refit. For this interface, this method, we will tell that this is a post method. This post should come from Refit. And then we will define the URL of this. We will say slash API slash auth slash login. This is the URL for our login, right? We can verify in our API endpoints, auth endpoints, and here we have our login endpoint, which is this slash API slash auth slash login, which is here. And then we have login DTO as a parameter. We'll pass it. This auth service, it will be injected by dependency container, so we don't need to worry about this. And then it returns API result of login response. So it is going to return as task of this thing, API result of login response DTU. Now to have these things, sorry, the way we have designed our APIs and our services, so we can directly copy the services here, service uh, method name, type, and parameters. Okay, let's quickly go to our API for other services. Auth service, here we have register async. So from here, from task till here, we can directly copy it. This is also going to be post method. Same thing, slash API slash auth slash register. Then we have one more, upload photo async. So let's copy this as well. This is also going to be post with URL we can get from auth endpoint. So let's go to the auth endpoint. Let's check. Initial will be API slash auth. After this, we'll have this register, user ID, and add photo. Now, inside these Refit interface attributes, these post, get, all these attributes, we can't have these route constraints. So this colon GUID will not work. We need to remove this. It should be direct string pattern. But here we'll use this. Now we'll pass this user ID and iForm file. Now from Refit, we cannot pass iForm file. So for this one, what we do, we have a stream part type. Okay. So we'll pass this photo as a stream part. Now, if you have worked on web, whenever we try to upload any file to any API or to server, that form needs to have one special attribute. Do you know that attribute name? If you know, pause this video and drop a comment in the description box, which is required. So there are two main requirements to upload file. First is the method of that form should be post, which we already have. There is one more requirement to upload files. Alright, so that is multi-part form data. So we need to set ENC type multi-part form data. And in Refit, for that we have a multi-part attribute. So here we have added this multi-part attribute on this method, stating that this is going to send or upload some file. That file we are passing as a stream part. So our iAuth API is ready. We'll add others later, or not much later. But right now let's set iAuth API. So then we'll go to our MAUI program, and here we already have our base URL setup. After this, we are going to say services dot add Refit client. Here we need to provide the type. That means I auth API, the type of our interface. Now we have connected it. Now we can leave it like this for default stuff. But here we will not have direct default stuff. We need to set the base address. So we can set dot configure HTTP client. Okay. Inside this, it gets one action delegate as an input parameter of HTTP client. So here we'll get HTTP client, and then we'll set HTTP client dot base address equals new URI of our API, a base API URL. Now we are good. We have set this up. Okay. Now let's quickly define other interface methods as well. So for this, we'll go to our service post service. Here first we have save post. So let's copy all these methods to our iPost API. Then we'll add the attributes. Okay, let's have get posts async. Then we have save comment async. Then we have get post comments async. Then we have toggle likes async. Toggle bookmarks async. Then we have this delete post async. All right. Now we'll add HTTP verb attributes here. So first save, it is going to be post with URL prefix at API slash posts slash, then there is going to be something. Let's copy this, add on these all, we'll modify these. Save. So save post is going to post, then get post async. This is going to be get. So we'll change it to get. Okay. Then save comment. Yes, this is going to be post. Then get post comments async. This is going to be a get request. Toggle like. This is going to be post. Toggle bookmark. This is also post. Delete post async. This is going to be delete. Now let's see the actual URLs. But before that, we'll filter out the parameters. For save post async, user ID, we are going to get user IDs from the claims principle. So we are not going to pass this user ID directly in our request body or request URLs. Remove user IDs from these. Cool. Now we need to add the URLs. So for this, let's go to post endpoints. API slash post. This is the main prefix. So we have added this API post for all. Then for saving the post, we have slash save. So that means this one slash save. Then for get post async, we don't have anything. So for this one, we will just remove this. The start index page size, because this is a get request, these things are automatically going to be added as a query parameter by Refit. Then we have save comment async. So for comment map post, we have this structure, post ID and comments. API slash post ID, then comments. And because this is a Refit attribute, we can't have route constraints. So we'll remove colon GUID from here. And same thing we'll have here, and we'll remove this GUID. This is post and this is get. Then we have toggle like, post ID, and then toggle like. So post ID and then toggle like. We can remove this GUID. Then for toggle bookmark, we have post ID and then toggle bookmark. Post ID, toggle bookmark, we'll remove this GUID. And then for the last one, that means delete post, we need to have API slash post slash delete post, and we'll remove this GUID. Now our iPost API is also ready. Now for this thing, everything will work, but it will not add anything to the for the authentication authorization. The way we have set up our JWT bearer, JWT token, that token should be added to the authorization header to each and every request which goes from this iPost API, right? So for this, we need to tell it that you need to use that header, authorization header. For that, on this interface level, we are going to use one attribute headers. Okay, this comes from Refit only. Inside this, we need to tell what is the header. So we'll say authorization header, the value of colon, bearer, space, and then it will add that JWT token here. Cool. It will not automatically add it. We need to tell it from where you will get this. That will set up. But right now, our post API is ready. We need this same header on this iUser API as well, but we don't need this on iAuth API. Okay. Now let's move iPost API to its separate file. Then let's move iUser API as well. And we'll go to iUser API, and here we'll define our user API related methods. So let's go to user service. There we have these three methods. Let's copy these. First, change photo async. Then we have get user post async. And then we have get bookmark post async. We'll remove user ID because this will be provided by token claims principal. Now first one is going to be post request with a prefix as /API/user, and we can actually copy this paste and paste. Now both of these get user post and get user bookmark post, these are going to be get request. Get and get. Now let's check the URLs. Let's go to the user endpoint. Here we have /API/user/change photo. This is for change photo. So this one, first one, change photo. And after this, we have /posts for this get user post. So API/user/posts. And then for bookmark post, we have this /bookmark posts. And our iUser API interface is also ready. Okay, now let's close all these tabs. Go to the MAUI program where we are setting our Refit client. We set up iAuth API, then we'll make a copy of this. We'll set up iPost API. Then we are going to make one more copy of this, and we'll say iUser API. Now because we are repeating this thing, so we can have a method here, helper method. So private void, or we can just have void, because this is a local function concept of C#. We can have a nested method. Inside this, we are having this void, and here we can simply say set HTTP client. We'll get HTTP client as a parameter to this, and we'll simply set HTTP client base address to this one. Now we can use this method directly in this configure HTTP client like this. Save it, and now we are good. Now after this, for first one, this will work with no problem. But for these two calls, these interfaces, these needs that authorization header value. That means the JWT token value. We need to tell it from where you will get that JWT token value. So for this, when we have this add Refit client method, inside this, if we see, we can have Refit settings. And there is one more version of this, which says func of iService provider and Refit settings. That means this func delegate, in which we will give iService provider as an input and we'll get Refit settings as output. We'll define this method, and we need this for these two. Do this. So we are going to define a method which should return Refit setting. Okay. So here we can name it, let's say get Refit settings. The input would be iService provider. Let's say SP. From here it should return new Refit settings. And we can use this get Refit settings directly in here. Now, inside this Refit settings, we have a property that is something authorization header value getter. Now, this is a func which has parameters HTTP request message and cancellation token, and it returns task of string as an output. Okay, so we can directly have this inline here. So we'll say first, we don't need HTTP request message, we don't need cancellation token, so we can simply skip these. I'm using these discard operators. Okay, and from here it should return the token task dot from result. We can simply say not 0, we'll say JWT token. Okay, so this is the basic setup, but now we need to provide this JWT token. Now how can we do this? So for this we need to get this JWT token from somewhere, and that somewhere should be when we will use this iAuth API to log in. Then we will get login response DTO, and from this login response DTO we will have this token, and then we'll save this token somewhere on a device and in somewhere here in our application basically. And then from that place we are going to provide this token here. Now for this, what I usually do, I simply create a state. It could be a service, or you can name it whatever you want. So for this, what I'll call it, I'm going to have a services method here as well, and I'll call it auth service.cs. This is in mobile MAUI applications, public class auth service. Okay, inside this I'm going to have a property for token. We will set this token when we'll work on the login functionality, but right now let's leave it like this. Then we will register this auth service as a singleton in our MAUI program. Here we'll say builder.services.add singleton auth service. Okay, now here we somehow need to access that auth service. Now how would we access it? Here if you see, we have iService provider. So from this service provider we can get our auth service. Okay, do this. Here we'll say worl auth service equals sp.get required service, and we'll say auth service. This is what service we need. Now we have this auth service. Now inside this task.from result we can say auth service.token. This can be null, so we can simply say this blank empty value. And with this, our Refit related setup is done. Okay. Now we can start working on our API and auth service related stuff. Now we will not revisit this unless we face some issue, but ideally we should not face any issue. It is fine. So for all these things, I already have a video. I'm again mentioning it. So do check that video out to learn about all these things in detail. Cool. Next, we'll work on our login and setting the value to this auth service. That thing we'll do next.